of learning. And basically, what it contains is physical and digital is blended. I'll be talking about that and I'll be raising a few questions. My target audience would be all the students, the faculty members, and respected members of the industry who are involved in education. So it's practically the entire people who are logged in. So please take your time to understand and please feel free to ask me questions. No issues about that. And the idea is generally to introspect about what we have been doing so far. So I go to my next slide. These are the questions I'll be addressing. Are schools and MTIs as we know them in marine engineering and nautical context obsolete? It sounds a pretty strong statement to start with. The idea is not to rock the boat. The idea is to introspect, as I said earlier. Are present-day pedagogical methods and curriculum suitable to prepare the mariner of tomorrow? So we look at it, and I'll raise some issues, and you'll understand where I'm coming from, and we again think over what we are doing today. Teaching methodology, that is the term on time-based class, creation of Kuch Malim Saabs, and true master or achieving mastery, creation of Sab Kuch Malim Saab. I think I should pause here to explain what is Kuch Malim Saab and Sab Kuch Malim Saab. I remember Yankee Sharma's post a long time back in a WhatsApp group. So he had explained who all these people are on board. A cadet, unfortunately, is regarded as a Kuch Nahi Malum Saab when he joins, because he joins is practically new. And the officers who got a bit of experience are Kuch Malim Saabs, and the master is the Sab Kuch Malim Saab. He knows everything. But I'll be deliberating on how we do this kind of creating Kuch Malim Saabs quite a bit. Addressing teaching methodology improvements within the ambit of STCW that I'll look at closely is knowing all necessary within the context of marine engineering and nautical studies, and training Kuch Malim Saabs to achieve mastery. How do we train the Kuch Malim Saabs to achieve mastery? I'll talk about it a bit later. So what is it I'm looking at? Today the world is changing. We all know that. The world, how it was when we joined sea was like this. We had a huge crew. As Yankee pointed out, they had 45 crew. I think he was talking about India's. In ACI, we had 55 plus. Short crew was 45. So we had a huge number of crew on board and trainee officers, including cadet ships. Then we had the gang of 4, that is the electrical officer, chief steward, purser, and radio officer, all the middle management, and the information processing, etc. And then we had the captain and chief engineer who used to make all the decisions. This is what the scenario was about 30-40 years back when I joined sea. And this is how all the schools and MTIs were training them in that context. But now what has happened is automation. So this part of it has shrunk to a great deal, as we know. Today, we have less than half the number of crew what we used to carry earlier when I was out at sea. And then, of course, the gang of 4 practically disappeared. Electrical officers makes his appearance only in container ships, perhaps. And of course, the middle management is also shrinking. And this is the same scenario in land as well. If you look at land industries, this is the same thing which is happening. The physical laborers are shrinking everywhere. The middle level management is also shrinking quite a bit. And the top level, as you see here, is increasing because of creative, innovative decision making, IT related work, consultants, and also your shore support staff which want to take part in the decision making, like tech superintendents and QHSE and IT and DPA, etc. So it is a huge amount of challenge that thanks to automation, AI and ML, etc., the whole world is changing. So the industry which Hanky highlighted, it is not industry 4.0. I think we are slowly but surely going towards industry 5.0. And that is going to be brought about by AI, that is artificial intelligence and machine learning, etc. So now I want you to go back and look at the question and ask yourself, are schools and MTIs as we know them in marine engineering nautical context obsolete? Are we training people for this, or are we continuing to train people for this? I leave you to introspect. You don't have to tell me anything. We'll go forward and look at the other slides. So our present day pedagogical methods and curriculum suitable to prepare the mariner of tomorrow. So this is something we look at again. STCW standards were drawn up because of large percentage of maritime casualties and pollution incidents are caused by human error. Now this is a very important factor which was highlighted by both Anil Kishore Singh and also Yankee. So this is a very important fact. STCW works out towards this. To achieve this, what they have done is they are more focused on standardized competence-based training requiring specific practical and performance-based outcomes. Now, this is so good that today the subjects and everything is standardized so that I can train a master the same way in Russia, the same way in Philippines, the same way in India, the same way in Burma or anywhere. So if I want to replace a master in Russia, I can always take a master from India and put him. If I want to replace a mate who is of Ukrainian nationality, no issues. I can always take a Chinese or a Filipino and put him there. That is how well this is done today. So it is working fairly well. So thus it fulfills the need of training seafarers regardless of nationality who can take over a vessel and make it operational safely. This is what has been achieved so far, and it has been done pretty well, I must say. However, now 15 key competencies have been identified by International Association of Maritime University. There is an IAMU association, and they have identified a lot of competencies, 15 of them, and some of them are these. So there's adaptability and flexibility, teamwork, leadership, responsibility, interpersonal and communication, and learning, and self-development skills. So now paths to reflect now. How do we inculcate skills such as problem solving, communication, developing a positive attitude, leadership, assertiveness, critical thinking, teamwork, etc.? How do we do that? Can we do that? Is there a lacuna in terms of leadership and assertiveness? We saw an issue off the coast of Mauritius, wherein the master was not willing to be assertive enough and gave in to the demands of the crew and went too close to the shore, and it paid with dire results. We have seen failures in leadership very often, wherein the masters don't take charge when they need to, particularly when there are issues relating to pilots. I don't have to name specific cases right now, but that is what is going on. So how do we do this now? Is STCW, does it have these things? Or it doesn't have these things? There are two schools of thought, as you know, everywhere. One is STCW has achieved its utility and it is no longer useful. The other team thinks that no, STCW is very, very important. What is it? Is it very important, or do we need to throw STCW out? So when you look for is at the STCW closely, is when you look at the curriculum and the teaching methodology improvements within STCW, there is scope for improvement. And that is something extraordinary. And that is something which we need to take cognizance of. Now, but however, it also puts the pressure on us, because how do we achieve a change in curriculum in a world of significant uncertainties about future, particularly in the direction of advancement of technology? Now, what do I mean by this? Let me explain. Now, we talk so much about replacement of HFO as a marine fuel oil. Now, there are several alternatives, as we know, for marine fuel oil. There is ammonia, there is LNG, there is methanol, there is hydrogen being talked about, there is batteries, operated ships being talked about. However, neither the technology nor regulation is in place. So how do I teach the candidate? What do I teach him? And how do I teach him? So that's a huge challenge. And how do we train seafarers for various levels or stages of autonomous vessels? Now, autonomous vessels have various stages, stage 1 to stage 5. And most likely in our lifetime, we probably will see stage 3. That's the maximum I expect us to do. But even for the stage 2 and stage 3, now what happens if you are to bring in these vessels? Do I need to have the dual certification back again? meaning the dual certification in IT, software, etc., so that the master and chief engineer have different kind of skill sets. Remember, we are already talking of autonomous vessels today. 10 years hence, it is likely that we may see some autonomous vessels in the more number of vessels around. And it takes to train a lot of time to train candidates for this. We all know that. It takes 3 years to train for a cadetship, and after that it needs about anything between 5 to 7 years till you get a master's. So 10 years from now, if you start today, 10 years from now, you're probably looking at these kind of vessels. So if you're looking at these kind of vessels, 10 years from now, is our present day pedagogical method and curriculum suitable to train a mariner of tomorrow? Because if you start today, as I said, you will end up in 10 years somewhere. Now, fortunately, some of the things what we talked about, what IAMU talked about, are already there in STCW Manila Convention. And some of them you'll see what they are. They are planning and coordination. For example, all these things are there, all of this. For example, assertiveness and leadership, obtaining and maintaining situational awareness, identify and consider generator options, situation risk assessment. A lot of these things are already there. And competence has been laid out. The measurement things have been laid out. This is what is there already. So that is a good part. Now I will digress a little bit and go into what is a present day scenario. So what is the teaching methodology? What do we use today? And how do we create Kuch Kuch Malim Saabs within the system? And why do we need a Sab Kuch Malim Saab all the time? And is knowing it all necessary within the context of marine engineering and nautical studies? As I said, we want to reflect upon this. So I'll discuss a few things and we go forward. Okay. So let us say, for example, we look at the school system as it is now. A student who gets into class 11, he doesn't need to get 100% in trigonometry to get into class 12. He can get anything between 50% to 100% basically. He will still be passed. He goes in because it's a time-based system which works. So by the time he comes to class 12, he probably knows anything between 50 to 100% of the subject. So if he knows just 50% of the subject, what it means is it doesn't know 50% of the subject. And we are building him again here in class 12, building more on that, on the gap. So now he gets into the University of MTI. The threshold here is physics, chemistry, maths 60%, as we know. So he gets 60% physics, chemistry, maths, and he passes the entrance test. He is here. Now on this background of wherein he could have got anything between 50 to 100% or plus 60 to 100%, we are teaching him celestial navigation, spherical trigonometry, and all those complicated stuff. In engineers, it is even worse. They teach him vector calculus, and again vector calculus, which is fairly complicated. And of course, we finally send them out to STCW or university or whatever it is for an exam or a test. I'll talk about this, what kind of damage we do here in a moment. Please bear with me. And then, of course, we have thermodynamics in class in school. And then we have Carnot cycle, which is being taught in MTI for engineers. Now, the considered opinion is just not my opinion that engineers have difficulty in comprehending thermodynamics and Carnot cycle. It is the opinion of a great guy called Rajiv Bajaj, who runs Bajaj scooters and motorcycles. When they wanted to recruit people, when they wanted to set up their R&D department, they went around to all the engineering colleges, IITs, VJTIs, you name it, each and every top engineering college in India. And in an interview, he said very clearly, and that interview is available on the net, you can check it out, that the topmost students from VJTI and IITs and all could not draw out a Carnot cycle. They didn't know the difference between a petrol engine and a diesel engine. That was the level of knowledge they had. So they had to really work hard to get engineers who are qualified to work in the R&D. Having run 2 container terminals as CEO, I can vouch for his experience. Okay, I have recruited more than 200 people in Mundra alone, And our engineering department used to be one of the biggest problem areas. We used to have 50% of attrition. And I used to take personal interest in recruiting engineers. And it is a horrendous time we used to have in getting good engineers. It doesn't matter what you want to pay. It is a huge amount of gap. And that gap is brought about because we insist upon pushing students from each class, regardless of whether he has achieved mastery here, anywhere. Now look at a similar situation in karate, for example. Okay, in karate, if you want to get a yellow belt to start with, you have to attain certain level of competence. If you, after attaining yellow belt, then if only if you attain a certain level of competence, you will get a brown belt and black belt and so on. I am sure a lot of us must have seen the movie called 36 Chamber of Shaolin. And that gives you a very good indication of how the Chinese used to develop a system where in teaching martial arts, wherein each student had to master a particular skill before he was promoted and allowed to go into the next chamber for further training. So the mastery was extremely important. So you have to become Sabkuch Malim Saab. Now, why do you need to become Sabkuch Malim Saab? It is very simple. It is Edward Deming's same thing. Doing it right the first time, every time. And we'll come back to this doing it right first time, every time in a moment. And we also talk about what damage we do here. This is my next slide. We have a kind of a reptilian brain, which is part of this, the center of our brain here, which kind of freezes up when we are put through kind of examinations and punishments. They are seen as threats. So the frontal part of the brain just shuts down. And what we do is we herd the students into an examination and say, perform or perish. So the poor sod, when he is out here, it is bad enough that he has not learned anything much here. It's bad enough that we have built upon this here, not too well. And he gets into this university and his brain is already frozen. And you cannot expect students to do well under these kind of circumstances. I'm sure you will agree with me on this. And I'll also come back to this in a moment, why punishments and examinations are seen as threats and why they are so important for us. So I go back to how the industry has progressed in teaching over the years. I remember attending Chalk and Talk. We were very lucky to have teachers like Captain Joseph, Captain Ravari, Captain Subramaniam. They were the best in the world. And if you have some of the best teachers, this is the way to go, probably. So we have a Chalk and Talk, which means the professor used to stand up in the podium, he used to teach us. Then they used to give us homework. We used to go and do homework. And yes, of course, we used to go and take the test. This progressed even when I was at school into something very nice, and that was television, to a video form. So the video which you see actually came up on television way back in 1970s or maybe, yeah, 70s or 80s, yes. So I remember watching some science programs in school and we were told to do some homework on that. So the video was coming up here. Then we had a projector and video, which was, I remember doing a course in 1993 or something of the sort. And this course was conducted by NCST, that is National Center for Software Technology, which was an offshoot of TIFR, Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. It came out from that. When they came out, they made that institute. And they used to teach with this. There used to be a facilitator sitting. He never used to interfere. The projector and the video used to run. We used to learn. The facilitator was there to facilitate and answer your questions at the end of the show. Today, what we have in a lot of places, including the Byju's and Khan Academy and all those people, is the YouTube, a video, or perhaps a teacher. Then they give you a homework. Then you do a YouTube video and a lecture review. And then, of course, you go for a test. Now, the thing is, competency-based training is outcome-based. Hence, mastery is essential. We saw that. Why do we need to do that? The believers of this, the YouTube, the Byju's of the world, they believe content is king. They think it is a Netflix, which is a challenge as we go forward. Because if we were to adopt this model in MTIs, it is going to be a challenge. And in spite of identifying the gaps in education, we keep moving the student. Sorry, you can hear me?
Please go ahead. Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. And now, how do we close the gap? We set the present day shortcomings right with superintendent visits, inspectors, audits, etc. Now, if you go back to my previous slide here, punishments and examinations are seen as threats, and we do the same here, right? Yeah, when a superintendent visits a ship, it is seen as an examination and it is treated as a threat by most ship staff. Because why is that? Why? Because if the class surveyor comes in and finds something non-conform, then he is going to fail this vessel. So you are failed. Same with SAR audits or oil company inspections or whatever be it. So whenever you see this, there is a dichotomy in the view of the ship staff and in view of the superintendents and the inspectors. There is a huge difference. And the ship staff always feels threatened, which is extremely sad because they ought to treat these visits as an opportunity to learn. Because you are going to get a lot of things, knowledge from these people's visit, because they are going to pull out a lot of things which you have not bothered or could not have looked at. Instead of learning from them, what we treat them as is threat, which is extremely sad. And why does it happen? We already seen that. So now what is happening now? This is the word called flip room, which has been coined by Sal Khan, and he is proposing something else, the way we should be teaching, and that is homework review and it is done by a teacher in the class. Now I remember this was nothing new in what Sal Khan is saying. I remember when I was in class 12, we had a teacher called Dr. Mrs. Vaidya. She was less than 5 foot tall, and she could strike terror in our minds if we don't learn. And she was a very good teacher. She used to be very, very nice, but also very strict. So we were forced to learn all the calculus formulas, integral and differentiation calculus, and she used to do the homework and the review in the class. So she will do all the problems in the class. She won't teach much things in class of calculus and integration. So we learned what the problems are and where we are making mistakes or where you can this ones. So we didn't have YouTube video those days, but these days you have YouTube video and you can always have lectures or whatever it is available online. However, I do see some of the colleges, some of the MTIs or some of the universities trying to go into this area. I do see that. This is a much better model, relatively speaking, compared to the chalk and talk model, obviously. In chalk and talk, unless and until you have Captain Josephs of the world, you are asking for trouble, basically. Then, of course, there has been a progression. For example, I believe Srini does some of this, like including case studies, and he acts as a facilitator and as a teacher. Then yes, the YouTube lectures and internet, the student is given a problem, a case study. The student is asked to view the internet, collect data, come back, make a presentation. And that is a kind of a test or whatever you can call it. There are very few people who do this particular thing. I know of one major ship manager who does this, including simulator, AR, particularly augmented reality. They don't funnily do much in virtual reality. That's what he told me. There's a friend of mine working there. And they do a lot of these case studies. They do a lot of simulator. They do a lot of augmented reality, which I'm sure simulator is done by many colleges as well. But there is one challenge in simulator, what we do in India, compared to what I see elsewhere. The most simulators, you have to correct me here, I may be wrong, in India are mostly two-dimensional. They don't have 3D rendering. Whereas in China, I was reading a research article, they are quite advanced in virtual reality and in 3D simulators. So they can manage to train a huge number of engineers within a very short span of time. In fact, that article said they have trained thousands of engineers using virtual reality and 3D modeling. And of course, yes, this usual mode of learning at home is YouTube video, lectures, internet, and of course the test is here. So we saw this again. Okay, I go to the next one. Okay, so now we address question is knowing it all necessary within the context of marine engineering, nautical studies, and training. We look at what is the meaning of knowing versus understanding. Now this Mayans knew about the positions of moon and eclipses. Okay. But they didn't have any understanding of why it was occurring. This is being highlighted by, not by me, but by a great physicist called Richard Feynman. Feynman was a huge, big name in physics, and he was part of the Manhattan Project. So there is a huge difference between knowing and huge difference between understanding. So you ask yourself, do I need to know each and everything? Can we separate what needs to be known from what needn't be? A few examples. Okay, we have celestial navigation. Do I need to know how to do every bit of it, the sites and everything? Or can I ask Alexa, Siri, or if not, at least a book, maybe a nutshell series to calculate sites? So we spend a huge amount of time in teaching students, cramming their heads with stuff which probably they don't need to know. Good examples, as I said, are celestial navigation, magnetism, probably meteorology. But you guys know better than me. But there are a lot of things which we need not know, or we know. So that is a very important part of it. But there are lots of things we need to develop an understanding of. And that is rules and regulations. So that is a very big problem. We may know ROR, we may know rule 5, but have we understood rule number 6, safe speed? Now, when you look at the accidents you have in various canals, I don't have to name the vessel which got into it, wherein the master and the pilots were going at nearly 13 knots. Was it safe speed in confined waters? Did they understand what were the perils of not going at safe speed? That is a challenge which we need to really set it right, and we need to set it right very fast. So we need to identify what needs to be understood in rules and regulations, because I can give you another example also. And this comes up in one of the, when you are part of several WhatsApp university groups, wherein serving masters and serving people who are at shore in high paid jobs, they will ask questions which will make you really think like, okay, now I have to go back and help this guy because he doesn't have much of an idea of Morpol or SOLAS. So they do not know even where to find the answers for their questions. Now that is an extraordinarily sad thing to be in, because if you don't know, that is okay. There are many things I don't know. There are many things I don't understand, but I should at least know where to look for the answers. Even that is a challenge. So we have a huge problem amongst us. Fortunately, ST Scheduler has a robust assessment and clear and manageable learning outcome, so we can use it. So we just need to identify most important competencies and how best to assess them. So we can tweak this ST Scheduler to a large extent to address what we need here, particularly in teaching methodology. In this particular presentation, I'll be addressing more on teaching methodology and less on curriculum change. And this is a very famous quote by Arthur C. Clarke. A teacher who can be replaced by a machine should be. And let me explain what he means by that in the next slide, and it will fall in place. That is so this helps us to train the kuch kuch malim sabs to achieve mastery. That's what we want to do, right? It is no point in raising issues without giving a solution. Now, how do we go for a solution? This is my way of looking at it. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Technology allows students to pace themselves by reducing time spent learning. Okay. And it also supports various students' levels and aptitudes. I'll explain this in a moment. But it needs support system, it needs a facilitator or teacher. Okay. Let me go down and I'll explain. Now, feedback can be made available all the time and through adaptive learning. Now, what is adaptive learning? I will explain. So we know a little more about the student levels and aptitudes. What we can do today with the technology is, especially on shore, we can always beam a mariner or a facilitator to assist. Okay, if a student has a problem sitting at home and trying to solve a problem at home and he is not able to do it, today is dead meat. He gets no assistance. So teachers, instead of spending the time, bulk of the time in teaching, maybe they can allow the student to learn on his own, and he does the problems. Whenever he encounters a problem, he calls the facilitator or the teacher. So this is a better way of teaching because you are assisting a student at where he needs you to. And because you are also looking at it, he can also make online questions wherein they get progressively tougher as you get more correct answers. This gives you an indication of the student's level or aptitudes. Let me explain this, what I mean by this a little bit better. If you are ever given a GMAT or a GRE exam, it will keep, and especially if you give it on a computer, it will keep throwing problems as you solve them more and more tougher as you solve more and more problems. If you do not solve more and more problems well, then progressively the questions asked will also be a little bit simpler. Okay, so it gives you it gauges your level and gives you a score. That is how they gauge you in a competitive things like GRE or GMAT. It is quite easy to develop these kind of questions, relatively easy, I would say, and that too online. And some of you must have already done it, I'm sure, and get a good assessment of students' levels and aptitudes. So when the student is flailing about, when he's unable to do the homework, you have a pretty good idea when he calls you to assist. So that is a good way of doing it. And mind the gap. The advantage in what I'm talking about here is basically the student paces own progress on study material. There is no fixed time, like he has to finish this in 1 year. Now, regardless of whether he gets 50, 60% or 100%, pass. If he gets 50 or 60% less than that, fail. No, it gives him as much time as the student wants to proceed. Let him study on his own. So what it does is, it pushes the responsibility onto the student. His ability to master the material is fixed, we all know that. But then what will improve is perseverance and mastery. Now he'll be forced to push himself more. And that is what you saw in the 36 Chamber of Shaolin or one of those karate movies, wherein the candidate who is really motivated perseveres more and more so that he can become from a kuch kuch malum sa to a sab kuch malum sa. So the responsibility to study is on the student. Okay. So they take ownership of pace and learning and willingness to become sab kuch malum sa. That's what we talked about. Now this again I paraphrase Arthur C. Clarke. If students have interest, education happens. Now let us face it, at the end of the day, desire to learn comes from within. Let me repeat it slowly again. Desire to learn comes from within. We can only kindle someone's interest. We cannot force a person to learn, right? But that is what we are doing today. What we are doing today with the chalk and talk is we are cramming information into their heads, and that student is forced to learn whatever he can within his own limitations, whatever be it. Then we put him in an exam room, and the reptilian brain just freezes, and at the end of the freeze, we declare him either to be passed or failed, regardless of how much he has understood the subject. That's what we do. Whereas if you turn it all around, put the honors of learning onto the student, he sets his own pace. He is at peace with himself. And if he is really motivated, he wants to become a Sapkuch man himself. If he doesn't, he falls off. That's his problem. Another one which we all mess up is, or we do not do enough of it, in fact, is peer learning. Now today, I remember using this peer learning when I was not in college, but in hostel. So whenever we had these SVCW examinations, we used to form a small group and learn together, particularly Hopkins law. It was extremely useful to learn that. Extremely useful to clear your doubts. Today it happens mostly at the initiative of the student and not the institution, which is a bit of a disgrace, because this has, I don't know whether this has changed much. This was the case when I was in college, and we used to form groups to study from one another. So some guy will teach us and we'll teach him. So we together we are better. So it is not about making learning happen, but letting it happen. So what we need to do, in my book at least, is from the institution level, we have to let it happen and not try to make it happen. Meaning, that's what we saw here. Like, let the student take ownership. Let him have the willingness to become a Sapkuch mal himself. Let him persevere. Let him push himself. And we act as a facilitator. We act as a mentor. We act as a guide. We tell him what to look for, what not to look for. Thing. And this is the last part, which I am pretty much, probably one of the most important things, which this is again in Latin. Rerum cognoscere causas, which was written by Virgil, and this is at the entrance to London School of Economics. What it means is basically, blessed indeed is he who knows the cause of things. What we want to have from the students is, he needs to know the cause of things. So rerum cognoscere causas, so blessed indeed is he who knows the cause of things. If we know the cause of things, we achieve mastery. We become Sapkuch mal himself on our own. Thank you.